I was one of the fortunate people who knew it, and it was done up on those $12. But I have the coat rack that came from that individual.
Did you ever go on vacation?
I was only 2 when I went on my first vacation. We went to Pennsylvania to visit relatives, and according to the stories I've been told, and the pictures in our photo album prove that I had a good time. In 1909, we 4 had a 3-week vacation with Grandpa Reinhardt to Peony, Colorado. In 1915, Father took us on a 3-month vacation. We 4, Ruth Bateman, and my cousin, and Minnie Jeffrey came from Pennsylvania to go with us. We spent June in Colorado in cherry picking time. Grandpa took us on trips up into the mountains near their home. July we was spent in California, in Oakland, at Uncle Owen James's. Can you imagine 6 people coming to visit you for a month? We went to World's Fair many days, and Uncle took us on excursions as far south as Los Angeles, as far north as the South Shore of the Big Trees. Another day at the Monterey, where we enjoyed Pacific Beach, the Shells, the old mission of Santa Barbara. Then the month of August at Mother's Sisters in Nez Perce, Idaho, and Brother John's Walla Walla, Washington, during the wheat harvest, where binders were pulled by 30 horses. My brother and I still marvel at the ease with which father managed his 6 suitcases and 2 trunks. The party of 6 never did we miss a train or lose a ticket. Coming home on a sleeper zone to Montana, I managed to draw attention by painting at my mother's feet, just as we entered the longest tunnel on the route. For some reason, they didn't put on the lights as usual. But a passenger, knowing from my side of the seat, managed to walk back to the doctor and told me that he called to him. It was my father that my mother needed him. He was so right. He got to the woman's room door just as we came out of the tunnel, and I was eventually aroused enough to walk back to my bunk. In 1930, before I took Grandma back to visit her folks in Pennsylvania. At 83, she was the life of the party. She recognized the brook by Barbara Fisher's house, where my great-grandfather was wounded when he knelt to get a drink after a hard battle in the Civil War. My great-grandmother had a blanket in the room and lived so close to Gettysburg that they could hear her really can. And she knew her husband was in that battle at Gettysburg. While I was teaching at Mansfield High School those 16 years, 1927 to 1942, I planned vacations that I thought would be helpful to bring back to my history classes, something to make the history books come alive. In 1935, I went on WLS radio station tour, shooting the rapids in the St. Lawrence River, visiting Canada's Quebec for French atmosphere, to Boston's Paul Revere, Concord Bridge, on down Cape Cod, Sandwich Gloucester. All in all, it was a very rewarding trip. In 1936, I went with a group to Florida, and from Key West to Cuba. University students were rioting, so we had to be very careful. I had quite a disgusting incident at the customs house there. When I got them on the boat at Miami, the Cuban students were just out of school, and so we expected to be considered foreigners. All of their trunks would be examined before the customs men would look at our suitcases. After 2 hours of waiting, the Cuban customs officer got to me with opening remarks, "Paquette, lady, paquette." So I opened my pocketbook. No, paquette, lady, paquette. Apparently, I appeared to be the one that they were seeking for something stolen. He didn't find it, and he got madder by the minute. I turned it inside out my new coat pocket. The next thing I knew, he opened his knife, grabbed my pretty new blue coat, and slipped the lining next to the button, stood it from shoulder to hem. It was Saturday night, so I had to wear my coat as was, and one very red-faced custom officer had to let me go. My friend Winona Kyle came to go with me to the World Fair in Chicago in 1937. And in 1939, we went to the World Fair in New York City. We joined the Illinois State Chorus, participating and practicing at the U of I, for our chorus sang at the World Fair on 3 occasions. We had been sent music in advance and were tested at the U of I on the morning before we departed. I accompanied a couple hundred singers at Cleveland and the 3 performances at the New York World Fair. For 4 consecutive winters, Charles Mosgrove attended the American Conference of Small Businesses in Washington, D.C. Of course, I went with him, staying at his sister lady's home in Arlington, Virginia. In the daytime, on music at the convention, I did research at the U.S. Archives and Congressional Library. That's from 1948 to 1952. We made other trips to Contamin, Pennsylvania, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and moved to the southern states. We enjoyed Florida in 1952 because our grandson Charles Milton accompanied us, seeing things that we might not have noticed. He almost got us into trouble, though, at Niagara Falls one time, when the customs officer asked where we were born. He thought, I was born in England, and of course, we had no passport for him. After Charles Milton and Virginia came to Rivers in 1955, we forged many trips. 3-week trip to Yellowstone Park in 1957, returning by Salt Lake City, Pikes Peak. In 1958, we went east, stopping at Lakewood, Ohio, to welcome their new girl cousin, Amy Dahl. Then on to the Atlantic Ocean from Maine south to Washington, D.C., then homeward bound. We frequently went to our plantation in Mississippi.
What have been some of your hobbies?
Making quilts. I have teach age and help mother and engaged in sculpture. I have enjoyed watercolor pictures ever since I was in Indiana under a very fine artist. I've made several hook rugs, some all wool yarn, but mostly, especially large ones I use in my home, using yarn for the designs for cutting strips and old coats for the background. I began antiquing in 1935. My mother had been at the U of I extension program, so one of the retreats was seeing the precaution of Mrs. Rose. Her mother came home about 11 that night. She did take off her coat, but not her hat, for she was so excited. Glenna, put this semester exams away. You can grade them later, for it is amazing how many pieces of glass in China we have right out, just like those of Mrs. Rose. It's amazing. As she talked, she was handing down piece after piece from the top shelf of our dining room cupboard. Let's go to the antique store in Urbana Methodist Church next Saturday. We, who had made fun of my Aunt Emma James Baker, the antique enthusiasm, now we were going to become antiques. I came home with a pink silver paperweight, for which I paid $2. This beauty so inspired me that I now have a collection of paperweights. Then when they became too expensive to buy, I collected as well. I have a button collection, a tissue postcard collection, now dolls. Knowing my knowledge of antiques and having a master's degree in history from the University of Illinois, when the Illinois Pioneer Heritage Center was proposed, I was asked to become a curator. September 18, 1965. For 10 years of Sundays, I toured at the museum in the afternoon, and usually spent 4 or 5 days a week with the curator duties. I was just ready to write my Mosgrove book in 1965, But my husband preferred I did lay the book, for he knew I would need to use him. I quit regular duties there in 1977, where I had promised Charles that I'd write this book. I still help him needed an okay artifact. I've had seminars there on buttons, dolls, glass, sound. Oh yes, and so too.
You mentioned writing books. Could you please list them?
My uncle, Professor Elias Owen James, Shakespearean professor in North College, Oakland, California, and I published our Elias B. Poston and his ancestors as a record of his descendants in 1942. He began his research with the known judge Poston, Russell, Indiana, and I traced the judge's ancestry back from his birth in 1786 from the block house next to Daniel Boone's Station in Kentucky. Elias B.'s father and mother were Elijah and Susanna Dawson. Poston, out of Loudon County, Virginia. Father Francis was from St. Mary's County, Maryland, where the immigrant John Poston arrived April 26, 1703. He had come from Liverpool, England. One family of Postons originally visited the Poston farm just east of Liverpool. Moreover, our Postons intermarried with Nortons and Spencers. Diana Spencer, the wife of Prince Charles, and I both can trace our ancestry back to Robert Spencer Jr., Sr., born in 1614. Naturally, I lost every TV account of my cousin's wedding. Poston is the paternal line. In 1948, I wrote the Bethel Congregational Christian Church, its history and its people, 1877 to 1948. The Newberry Library in Chicago comments that the value of my uses of pictures and maps, placing families in each house and each direction from a rural church was very valuable, because if a tenant did not own land or property, there was no way to trace it excepting through the church. In the early days, they may not have even paid taxes. I sold 400 books and still answer inquiries for present theological pages. Taxes, for present genealogy. In 1954, I published my mother's genealogy, Reinhardt descendants, Johann George and Eliza Margaret Reinhardt, 1752 to 1954. The Allied families, Ansel, Cox, Dean, James, South, 70, 286 pictures, pages, family pictures, and maps. George Reinhardt qualified upon arrival. Philadelphia, November 3, 1762, on the Queen of Denmark. Sailing from Hamburg, Germany, 130 passengers. I wrote an 11-page poem in 3 cantos on Mary Birch Icestone. Canto 1 dealt with the storm of January 20th, 1959, explaining how we four fared at Marybirch, our home. Then, as we emerged to Grandma James's room and finally to Bethel and to Mansfield, I added verses of chronological happenings as I heard of them from time to time. This Canto 2 being recorded January 25th. Canto 3, February the 2nd. After 4 weeks and 4 days, I made my first telephone call to my mother. Not on our mutual line, but by way of pharmacy. It was on her 87th birthday. When I had finished the poem, I remembered that Ada Nichols had given each member of the Bethel Women's Scholarship $1. Now my lost talent could be used, so I sold $90 worth to Bethel and other editors, who, as I wanted such records recorded of this most unusual storm on the Clara. Folklore at its best. In 1977, I was run the Bethel Centennial Committee, so we wrote very nice books and pictures of 3 stages of the building in Bethel, the story of people. Then Nora Rogers and I wrote Centennial Moments, which we gave a 5-minute story or action on beginning of church services once a month for the 12 months preceding the centennial date of November 19th, 1977. We had a super centennial on Sunday, November 20th. In 1979, I published Mosgrove to Mosgrove, 1066 to 1979. The Allied families of Squire, Tower, Schaefer, Peters, Graff, Brown, Leslie, Ross. 346 pages include 10 half and 139 photographs. Family chart is numerous identification, about 1,200 names in the index. 4 pages of bibliography. Since then, I have traced my husband's Mosgrove relatives all the way back in this book. We are coming to England with William the Conqueror in 1066. Also in 1979, I got my James Day organized, since I could not afford publishing 2 books in 1 year. And then Busey Picard has sent me a file begging the Allied family of James to be included in her book. It's similar to page. I accepted. My name is Rick Thomas James, born 1654 near London. Came to Maryland by 1678, at least he got his first time there. And Lord Baltimore's gunpowder man, just east of Baltimore. His son, Martin James, 7 years old, 1754, had son John, who married Lucy, and bought a farm, Cal Raiders, 2 miles southwest of Bonneville, North Carolina. So my grandfather lies close in James Church. So he was one of 12 sons of North Carolina. So I spent wasted years trips to courthouses in North Carolina, all in vain. The farm was in North Carolina in 1790, but the state line, not the farm, moved. So by 1796, when John and Mary sold to Elisha James, a senior to slave Sal, it was a sale in Tennessee. Elisha Senior, the Hamilton County, Ohio. Then the rest are Indiana, where his son Elisha Jr. married Judge Postman's daughter. Elisha Jr. and City Ann buried her in Mansfield Cemetery. Also their son Elias Postman James from my pilot town, that means. In The Good Life of Piatt County, edited by Jesse Morgan, he asked me to be responsible for the data to be found Blue Ridge. The book was a project of the Piatt County Board of Supervisors in honor of the subcentennial year of Illinois in 1968.
I've been curious about you having your big red book, The Who's Who of Women. By any chance, are you in it?
Yes. I had that on, and I still don't know who set my name to Cambridge, England. Now, when Illinois laws written and prepared under supervision of Private Walton, the state historian, recording biographies of contemporary leaders in Illinois. I was not too surprised because he was busy doing the state historical meeting held in our Illinois pioneer Harrisburg, Montana, in 1968. But a questionnaire coming for the 6th edition of the World Who's Who of Women surprised me. My picture and biography are on page 568, published in 1982. Then in 1984, the same publisher sent me a questionnaire for a dictionary of international biography. It's interesting to note the different provisions of similar questionnaires. The personalities of the West and the Midwest informed on that out of Curious Manuscript in 1965 to 83. The article on the border manager, 67 to 83. Piatt County History and Genealogical Society membership. I was Bethel Choir, Church Choir Director, pianist, organist. 2 honors to be filled out. One was the brass plaque presented in 1972 in appreciation 4 years ago by God was used to take that picture. Looks like you fell. And the gold frame plaque appreciated for community service in and still organized at that home and played for the wedding of my great granddaughter, Miss Jack Hospital, at the time of death in 1986.